Mental toughness is not built when people are watching. It is built in silence, in boredom, in loneliness, in the moments where quitting would be easy and no one would ever know. This audiobook is not here to motivate you. It is here to condition you, to strip away weakness, emotional noise, and dependency on validation. If you can master discipline in private, life cannot break you in public. And once you understand that truth, you will never look at effort, pain, or progress the same way again. Chapter 1. Stop performing, start training. Most people don't lack talent, they lack honesty. They confuse effort with exposure. They confuse progress with applause, and they mistake being seen for becoming strong. That's the problem. If your work changes when people are watching, it was never real work to begin with. If your discipline disappears when the room is empty, then it was never discipline. It was performance. You have a choice. You can perform for approval, or you can train for results. And that choice shows up every single day. Look closely at how people behave. They move differently when eyes are on them. They push harder when praise is possible. They post progress before it's earned. That's not strength, that's insecurity dressed up as effort. If it needs an audience, it isn't discipline. That's the key. Real training doesn't care who is watching. Real training happens early, before the world wakes up. It happens in empty rooms, quiet mornings, and long stretches of boredom. No music, no motivation, no applause. Just repetition. Just commitment. Just you. Social media turned self-improvement into a performance art. People don't ask, "Am I better than yesterday?" They ask, "Does this look impressive?" Mental toughness is not built when people are watching. It is built in silence, in boredom, in loneliness, in the moments where quitting would be easy and no one would ever know. This audiobook is not here to motivate you. It is here to condition you, to strip away weakness, emotional noise, and dependency on validation. If you can master discipline in private, life cannot break you in public. And once you understand that truth, you will never look at effort, pain, or progress the same way again. Chapter 1. Stop performing, start training. Most people don't lack talent, they lack honesty. They confuse effort with exposure. They confuse progress with applause, and they mistake being seen for becoming strong. That's the problem. If your work changes when people are watching, it was never real work to begin with. If your discipline disappears when the room is empty, then it was never discipline. It was performance. You have a choice. You can perform for approval, or you can train for results. And that choice shows up every single day. Look closely at how people behave. They move differently when eyes are on them. They push harder when praise is possible. They post progress before it's earned. That's not strength, that's insecurity dressed up as effort. If it needs an audience, it isn't discipline. That's the key. Real training doesn't care who is watching. Real training happens early, before the world wakes up. It happens in empty rooms, quiet mornings, and long stretches of boredom. No music, no motivation, no applause. Just repetition. Just commitment. Just you. Social media turned self-improvement into a performance art. People don't ask, "Am I better than yesterday?" They ask, "Does this look impressive?" That question destroys progress. Because once the goal becomes looking disciplined instead of being disciplined, everything changes. Your pace changes, your standards drop, your consistency collapses. You start chasing reactions instead of results. You don't need their permission. You don't need their validation, and you definitely don't need an audience to become formidable. It's not about motivation, it's about discipline. Motivation is loud, discipline is quiet. Motivation needs hype, discipline needs a schedule. Motivation fades, discipline shows up. You have a choice. You can wait until you feel inspired, or you can train even when you feel nothing. That's the difference between performers and professionals. Performers warm up when the crowd arrives. Professionals train long before anyone is watching. Think about the early morning, the hour when excuses are strongest, the hour when comfort whispers, "Stay down." That's where training begins. No cameras, no updates, no one to impress. Just the decision to move when it would be easier not to. That decision rewires you. Every time you choose discipline in private, you strengthen a muscle no one can take from you: self-respect. And self-respect doesn't come from likes or compliments. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. That's the key. Most people break promises to themselves daily. They say they'll start tomorrow. They say they'll stay consistent. They say they'll push through discomfort. Then no one is watching, and they quit. That quiet moment is everything. Because life doesn't test you in public. It tests you when you're tired, unobserved, and emotionally exposed. If you only work hard when someone is watching, life will crush you when no one is. You have a choice. You can build a life that collapses without attention, or you can build a foundation that holds under silence. Training in private feels unrewarding at first. There is no instant feedback, no praise, no external confirmation that you're on the right path. That's why most people avoid it. But that discomfort is not a flaw, it's the point. It's not about how it looks, it's about how it compounds. 10 minutes of focused work alone beats an hour of distracted performance. One honest session in silence beats a week of loud inconsistency. If it needs an audience, it isn't discipline. Say it again. If it needs an audience, it isn't discipline. Let that sentence burn into your behavior. The strongest people you know don't talk much about what they're doing. They don't announce their plans. They don't explain their process. They execute. Silently, relentlessly, daily. They understand something most people miss. Attention is a drug, and once you depend on it, you lose control. You start adjusting your actions to please others. You soften your standards. You chase approval instead of progress. That's not training. That's emotional dependency. You don't need their permission. You don't need encouragement to act in your own best interest. You don't need validation to do what must be done. That's the mindset shift. From "who will notice" to "what must be done." From "how does this look" to "does this build me?" That shift is uncomfortable, and that's why it works. Here's the instruction. Stop announcing your goals. Stop posting your progress. Stop seeking feedback before results exist. Train quietly. Set a standard, a non-negotiable standard, and meet it whether you feel inspired or invisible. Wake up earlier than you want to. Work longer than feels comfortable. Repeat actions that feel boring but necessary. That's not punishment. That's preparation. You are not here to impress. You are here to improve. And improvement does not require witnesses. You have a choice. Every rep done alone builds internal authority. Every session completed without praise strengthens emotional control. That's the muscle this book is about. Mental toughness. Not the loud kind, not the aggressive kind, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't flinch when no one is watching. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to continue. This chapter is not asking you to disappear. It's asking you to become real. Because once your discipline no longer depends on attention, you become dangerous in the best way. Unshakable, focused, consistent. You stop performing, you start training. And when training becomes your identity, outcomes become inevitable. You mastered the difference between performance and discipline. Now it's time to understand where real strength is forged. Not in praise, not in comfort, but in pressure. Chapter 2. The mind is forged when no one claps. Applause is addictive, and addiction makes you weak. Most people don't realize this. They think encouragement is fuel. They think praise is necessary. It's not. Praise feels good, but it trains the wrong muscle. It trains you to move only when rewarded. It conditions you to stop when the reward disappears. That's the trap. The strongest minds are not built in moments of recognition. They are built in moments of neglect, when effort goes unnoticed, when progress feels invisible, when no one cares. That's where the mind is forged. You have a choice. You can rely on external energy, or you can generate your own. That's the key. Look at how quickly people quit when support fades, when messages stop coming, when likes drop, when no one asks how it's going. Their effort collapses because it was never rooted in discipline. It was rooted in performance. If you need clapping to continue, you are not strong. You are dependent, and dependence kills mental toughness. It's not about encouragement, it's about endurance. Endurance is built in silence. Think about the moments that actually shaped you, not the celebrations, not the wins, the lonely nights, the boring routines, the long stretches where nothing seemed to change. Those moments didn't feel powerful, but they were, because they forced you to confront yourself without distraction.
You already learned where that leads. You have a choice. Set standards that don't depend on visibility, or live a life that collapses under pressure. Here's the instruction. Define non-negotiables. Not goals, rules. Rules you follow regardless of emotion. Wake time, work duration, training minimums, focus blocks. Write them down if needed, but more importantly, enforce them. No excuses, no exceptions. Exceptions weaken standards. Standards only work when they are boring and consistent. That's the key. Most people overestimate motivation and underestimate enforcement. They think feeling driven will save them. It won't. Only standards survive low-energy days, and low-energy days are most days. Standards remove choice. You don't decide whether to show up. You decide once and then you obey. That obedience to your own rule builds authority. Authority over yourself. That's mental toughness. Every time you keep a private standard, you reinforce trust with yourself. Every time you break one, you erode it. Trust is cumulative. Lose enough of it and you stop believing yourself. That's why people struggle to change. They don't trust their own promises. And trust is rebuilt one kept standard at a time. You don't need their permission to enforce standards. You don't need validation to be strict with yourself. Discipline is not punishment, it's alignment. Alignment between who you say you are and how you behave. Misalignment creates anxiety. Alignment creates calm. That calm shows up publicly as confidence. People think confidence is personality. It's not. It's integrity with self. Integrity is built in private. That's the key. Here's another truth. If your standards change based on who is watching, they aren't standards. They're image management. Image management is exhausting. Standards are simple. They don't care about optics. They don't care about excuses. They care about execution. And execution shapes outcomes. This is why disciplined people seem lucky. Their results look effortless. They're not. They are the visible effect of invisible rules. Rules followed when no one was watching. You have a choice. Blame circumstances or refine standards. Circumstances will always fluctuate. Standards give you control. Control over effort, control over direction, control over response. That control is rare, and rare traits create separation. This chapter is about reclaiming authority over your behavior, not through intensity, through consistency, not through motivation, through enforcement. Private standards are the blueprint of your life. Change the standards and the outcomes change. Ignore them and nothing else matters. You now understand how standards shape results, but standards require something most people avoid: pressure. And pressure reveals everything. It's not about ignoring emotions. It's about not obeying them blindly. Emotions can speak, they cannot decide. That's the hierarchy. Most people reverse it. They let fear decide. They let boredom decide. They let insecurity decide. Then they wonder why their life feels chaotic. Chaos comes from emotional leadership. Order comes from discipline. You have a choice. Here's a real-world example. Two people wake up tired. One listens to the feeling and goes back to sleep. The other acknowledges the feeling and still gets up. Same emotion, different outcome. Over time, their lives separate completely. One becomes resilient, the other becomes reactive. It's not about talent. It's not about luck. It's about response. Discipline trains response. That's the key. The more you act without the mood, the quieter emotions become. Not because they disappear, but because they lose authority. You stop being pushed around internally. You become stable. And stability is rare. Stability under pressure is dominance. You don't need their permission to be stable. You don't need validation to be consistent. You need repetition. Here's another instruction. When emotion shows up, label it: boredom, resistance, fatigue. Then proceed anyway. No fight, no drama, just execution. This is how professionals operate. They don't identify with emotion. They observe it and move. That separation is mental toughness. Most people think toughness is intensity. It's not. It's calm continuation. The ability to keep going without internal noise. That's rare. That's powerful. That's trained. You have a choice. Let moods dictate your output, or let standards define it. One leads to inconsistency. The other leads to identity. And identity compounds. Once discipline becomes who you are, you stop negotiating. You stop explaining. You stop needing to feel ready. You just act. This chapter is about removing emotion from leadership, not eliminating feeling, but eliminating control. Once you do that, effort becomes reliable, progress becomes predictable, and life becomes simpler. You mastered comfort, you mastered mood. Now it's time to confront another habit that drains strength quietly: the need to explain yourself. Chapter 5. Stop explaining yourself. Every explanation is a leak of energy, a leak of confidence, a leak of authority. Most people don't realize this. They think explaining is clarity. They think it's maturity. Often, it's insecurity. You don't explain because it's necessary. You explain because you want to be understood, approved, validated. That's the habit. And that habit keeps you weak. You have a choice. You can explain yourself, or you can build results. You rarely need both. That's the key. Strong people don't narrate their lives. They don't justify their decisions. They don't argue for their discipline. They act, and the action speaks. Weakness seeks agreement. Strength seeks execution. Look at how often people explain their plans before they move. They talk about what they're going to do, why they're doing it, how serious they are this time. That talking feels productive. It's not. It replaces action with noise. And once you've explained yourself, you feel relieved, as if something has been accomplished. Nothing has. You don't need their permission to change your life. You don't need approval to keep a standard. That's the mindset shift. Explaining invites opinions. Opinions invite doubt. Doubt weakens execution. That chain is predictable. Every explanation opens a door to criticism, to distraction, to emotional interference. Silence closes those doors. That's the key. People explain because they fear being misjudged, but judgment is unavoidable. Someone will misunderstand you no matter what. So stop trying to manage perception, manage behavior. Your discipline doesn't need a press release. Here's the truth most people avoid. When you explain yourself, you're asking for permission after the fact. Permission to rest, permission to work, permission to be different. That permission is never required. You have a choice. Either you live by internal standards or you live by external approval. External approval is unstable. It changes with opinion, mood, and convenience. Internal standards are fixed, and fixed standards create calm. That calm is authority. Watch people who explain constantly. They justify why they're tired, why they can't commit, why they changed plans. They are always defending. Defense is exhausting. You don't need to defend the life you're building quietly. Here's the instruction. Reduce your explanations to the minimum. Not to be rude, not to be secretive, to be focused. When asked why you're working so much, say nothing, or say, because it matters. When questioned about your routine, don't over-elaborate. When challenged, don't argue. Execute. That's the response. Results end conversations. That's the key. Silence forces people to deal with outcomes instead of opinions. At first, this feels uncomfortable. You will feel misunderstood. You will feel the urge to clarify. That urge is habit. Let it pass. Every time you resist explaining, you reclaim power, because explaining gives others influence over your decisions. No explanation means no negotiation. That's mental toughness. This chapter is not about arrogance. It's about containment. Energy conserved is energy available. When you stop explaining, you gain time, focus, clarity. You stop managing perception, you start managing execution. You have a choice. Talk about the work or do the work. Talking creates a false sense of progress. Doing creates real progress. Only one compounds. Here's a real-world example. Two people decide to change. One announces it, explains it, defends it. The other disappears, trains, returns different. Who gained leverage? Silence always wins long-term, because silence builds credibility. You don't need to convince anyone when your behavior is consistent. Consistency is the loudest signal. Explaining weakens that signal. That's the key. This chapter is about closing the mouth and opening the work. When you stop explaining yourself, you remove external noise. When noise disappears, focus sharpens. And with focus comes momentum. Momentum does not argue, it moves. You are not here to be understood. You are here to become capable. Capability does not require explanation. You mastered mood, you mastered comfort, you mastered silence in your speech. Now it's time to define what actually governs your life. Not words, not intentions, standards. Chapter 6. Your private standards define your public life. Your life is not shaped by what you say. It is shaped by what you tolerate. What you tolerate privately becomes who you are publicly. That's the truth most people avoid. They think success is about ambition, about goals, about intention. It's not. It's about standards. And standards are revealed when no one is enforcing them. You have a choice. Either you live by public expectations or you live by private standards. Public expectations change. Private standards compound. That's the key. Most people behave differently when they are alone. They lower effort. They relax discipline. They let small things slide. They think it doesn't matter. It does. Because every small exception you allow in private trains your mind to accept less. And over time, less becomes normal. Private shortcuts create public consequences. You don't wake up one day undisciplined. You practice it quietly. Late nights when you should sleep, scrolling when you should focus, skipping effort when no one would notice. Those moments don't feel dramatic, but they are decisive. You have a choice. Every private decision either strengthens your standard or weakens it. There is no neutral behavior. That's the key. High performers understand this early. They don't rely on supervision. They don't need accountability partners to behave correctly. They are self-governed.
Self-governance is power. If you need pressure to behave, you are not disciplined, you are managed. And when management disappears, so does your effort. You don't need their permission to hold yourself to a higher standard. You don't need praise to keep your word. You don't need consequences to do what you said you would do. You need identity. Identity is built by private behavior. Look at how people talk about potential. Potential means nothing without standards. Talent without standards becomes arrogance. Intelligence without standards becomes distraction. Ambition without standards becomes frustration. Standards turn ability into results. That's the key. Ask yourself one question. What do you do when no one is watching? That answer explains your life. If you are sloppy in private, your public results will be unstable. If you are disciplined in private, your public performance will be predictable. Predictability is strength. Most people want freedom without structure. They want results without rules. That never works. Structure creates freedom. Private standards are structure. They decide when you wake up, how you work, what you tolerate, what you stop. Without standards, emotion takes over. Mood decides. Comfort negotiates. You already
learned where that leads. You have a choice. Set standards that don't depend on visibility, or live a life that collapses under pressure. Here's the instruction. Define non-negotiables, not goals, rules. Rules you follow regardless of emotion. Wake time, work duration, training minimums, focus blocks. Write them down if needed, but more importantly, enforce them. No excuses, no exceptions. Exceptions weaken standards. Standards only work when they are boring and consistent. That's the key. Most people overestimate motivation and underestimate enforcement. They think feeling driven will save them. It won't. Only standards survive low-energy days, and low-energy days are most days. Standards remove choice. You don't decide whether to show up. You decide once, and then you obey. That obedience to your own rule builds authority. Authority over yourself. That's mental toughness. Every time you keep a private standard, you reinforce trust with yourself. Every time you break one, you erode it. Trust is cumulative. Lose enough of it, and you stop believing yourself. That's why people struggle to change. They don't trust their own promises. And trust is rebuilt, one kept standard at a time. You don't need their permission to enforce standards. You don't need validation to be strict with yourself. Discipline is not punishment, it's alignment. Alignment between who you say you are and how you behave. Misalignment creates anxiety. Alignment creates calm. That calm shows up publicly as confidence. People think confidence is personality. It's not. It's integrity with self. Integrity is built in private. That's the key. Here's another truth. If your standards change based on who is watching, they aren't standards. They're image management. Image management is exhausting. Standards are simple. They don't care about optics. They don't care about excuses. They care about execution. And execution shapes outcomes. This is why disciplined people seem lucky. Their results look effortless. They're not. They are the visible effect of invisible rules. Rules followed when no one was watching. You have a choice. Blame circumstances or refine standards. Circumstances will always fluctuate. Standards give you control. Control over effort. Control over direction. Control over response. That control is rare, and rare traits create separation. This chapter is about reclaiming authority over your behavior, not through intensity, through consistency, not through motivation, through enforcement.
Private standards are the blueprint of your life. Change the standards and the outcomes change. Ignore them and nothing else matters. You now understand how standards shape results, but standards require something most people avoid: pressure. And pressure reveals everything.
That pause you learned earlier, use it everywhere. When anger rises, pause. When temptation appears, pause. When ego wants to speak, pause. In that pause, ask one question: what serves my standard? Then act. That question turns emotion into information, not command. This is how you become dangerous, because you are no longer controlled by the environment. You are internally governed. Internal governance creates external respect. People feel it. They don't know why you seem solid. They don't know why you're calm. They just know you're not easily moved. That's authority. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to display it. It's felt. Self-control also creates consistency. When impulses stop hijacking behavior, progress becomes steady. No spikes, no crashes, just forward motion. That's rare. Most people are intense one day and absent the next. Self-controlled people are reliable. Reliability beats brilliance. Every time. You have a choice. Be impressive occasionally or be effective always. Always wins. Self-control is also protection. It protects your energy, your focus, your time. You stop wasting resources on drama, reaction, and regret. Regret disappears when behavior aligns with standards. Alignment creates peace. Peace under pressure is dangerous because pressure breaks most people. It doesn't break you. It sharpens you. That's the key. Let's connect everything you've learned. You stopped performing. You trained without applause. You confronted comfort. You acted without mood. You stopped explaining. You set private standards. You sat with pressure. You repeated relentlessly. You embraced silence. All of that leads here. Self-control. Without it, none of the above holds. With it, everything compounds. Self-control is the lock that keeps discipline in place, and once discipline is locked in, results are inevitable. Inevitable results make you dangerous, not to others, but to limitation. Limitation cannot survive consistency. Excuses cannot survive standards. Chaos cannot survive control. You don't need their permission to be this way. You don't need approval to change your operating system. You already made the choice by staying through this book. Now comes the final step: application. Daily, quietly, relentlessly. This chapter is not asking you to become aggressive. It's asking you to become unshakable. Unshakable people don't need to prove anything. They don't need to react. They don't need to rush. They execute. And execution changes everything. You are no longer chasing mental toughness. You are practicing it. And practiced toughness becomes identity. Identity becomes destiny. You are now equipped. The rest is on you. You have a choice. Build this quietly or return to noise. But you already know which path creates power. Now, let's seal everything you've learned. It's time to bring it together. Mental toughness was never meant to be loud. It was never meant to be impressive. It was meant to be reliable. Built when you wake up early without telling anyone. Built when you keep going without encouragement. Built when you choose discipline even when no one is watching. If you train in private, life cannot expose you in public. If you control your emotions, chaos cannot control your direction. So here is the challenge. Stop waiting to be seen. Stop waiting to feel ready. Build your strength in silence and let your results make the noise for you.
Chapter 7. Learn to sit with pressure.
Pressure is not the problem. Your reaction to it is. Most people run from pressure. They distract themselves. They escape. They numb. And in doing so, they stay weak. Pressure is unavoidable. Life applies it whether you are ready or not. The question is simple. Can you sit with it? You have a choice. You can resist pressure, or you can use it. That's the key. Pressure reveals your true conditioning, not your potential, not your intention, your conditioning. When pressure hits, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your training. If your training avoided discomfort, pressure will expose you. That's not punishment. That's feedback. Most people think pressure means something is wrong. It doesn't. Pressure means you are being tested, and tests are necessary. Think about what people do when pressure shows up. They rush decisions. They seek relief. They look for exits. They want the feeling to stop. That desire is the weakness. Mental toughness is not eliminating pressure. It's staying present inside it. Calm, controlled, unmoved. That's the skill. You don't need their permission to feel pressure. You don't need validation to endure it. You don't need reassurance to stay. You need restraint. That's the key. Pressure is a signal that something matters. If it didn't matter, you wouldn't feel it. Running from pressure is running from growth. Here's the hard truth. The ability to sit with pressure determines your ceiling. People who panic early cap themselves. People who stay composed go further. That pattern is everywhere. Business, relationships, training, life. Pressure increases as responsibility increases. If you can't sit with pressure, you can't carry more. You have a choice. Train avoidance or train endurance. Endurance is built deliberately. Here's the instruction. Stop reacting immediately. When pressure hits, pause. Breathe slowly. Stay still. Observe the sensation. No escape. No distraction. This is not passive, it's active control. You are teaching your nervous system that pressure is survivable. That lesson changes everything. Most people never learn it. They react instantly. They speak too fast. They act too soon. They make emotional decisions. Then they regret them. Regret comes from pressure mismanaged. Sitting with pressure builds clarity. Clarity only appears when you don't run. That's the key. Think of pressure like weight. If you drop it immediately, you never get stronger. If you hold it, controlled, you adapt. The mind works the same way. Pressure held calmly builds capacity. Pressure avoided builds fragility. You have a choice. Start small. Sit with discomfort without fixing it. Delay gratification. Hold eye contact. Stay silent in conflict. Finish the hard set. These are pressure reps. Each rep trains restraint. Restraint is power. Most people think power is aggression. It's not. Power is control under stress. The person who stays calm while others react controls the situation. That's dominance. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need approval to slow down. Silence under pressure unsettles weak minds, because weak minds need release. Strong minds contain. Containment is mental toughness. Pressure will try to rush you. It will try to make you emotional. It will try to make you explain, defend, or quit. Don't. Pause. That pause is everything. In that pause, you choose response instead of reaction. That's the key. Over time, pressure loses its edge. Not because it disappears, but because you grow. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt urgent becomes strategic. This is how leaders are formed, not by avoiding stress, by mastering it. You have a choice. Let pressure control you, or let it train you. Training happens in silence, in stillness, in restraint. Every time you sit with pressure without breaking, you expand your capacity. Capacity creates confidence. Confidence creates authority. Authority attracts responsibility. Responsibility increases pressure. And the cycle continues. If you can sit with pressure, there is no ceiling. This chapter taught you how to stay present when pressure arrives. Now it's time to understand how real progress is built. Not through intensity, through repetition. Chapter 8. The Discipline of Repetition. Repetition is not exciting. That's why it works. Most people chase intensity. They want breakthroughs. They want transformation to feel dramatic. That desire keeps them inconsistent. Real progress is quiet, boring, predictable, and unstoppable. You have a choice. You can rely on intensity, or you can rely on repetition. Only one survives time. That's the key. Intensity is emotional. It spikes and crashes. Repetition is structural. It shows up whether you feel like it or not. Mental toughness is not built in moments of extreme effort. It's built in ordinary days executed perfectly. Same actions, same standards, same effort. Again, and again, and again. Most people underestimate this. They think repeating the same thing means they're stuck. They think boredom means something is wrong. It doesn't. Boredom means you are doing the work that actually matters. Repetition removes ego. There's nothing to prove, nothing new to chase, just execution. That's why weak minds avoid it. Weak minds need novelty. They need stimulation. They need something to feel different every day. Strong minds build tolerance for sameness. That tolerance is discipline. You don't need their permission to repeat what works. You don't need validation to stay consistent. You don't need excitement to keep going. You need structure. That's the key. Repetition builds identity. You don't become disciplined by deciding once. You become disciplined by doing the same thing until it becomes automatic. Automatic behavior is power. When actions no longer require debate, you conserve energy. When you conserve energy, you can sustain effort longer. Sustainability beats intensity any time. Look at people who burn out. They go all in, briefly, then disappear. They weren't weak, they were impatient. They wanted change faster than repetition allows. But repetition doesn't rush, it compounds. Small actions repeated daily create massive separation over time. That's the truth most people don't want to hear. You have a choice. Chase progress you can feel, or build progress you can't see yet. Invisible progress is the most valuable. Because while others quit out of boredom, you continue. And continuity is rare. That rarity creates advantage. Repetition is how you harden the mind. Doing the work when it feels pointless. Showing up when there's no feedback. Executing when improvement is subtle. That's where discipline is trained. Say it clearly. Repetition builds resilience. Repetition builds confidence. Repetition builds control. Not motivation, not inspiration. Repetition. That's the key. Here's the mistake most people make. They change the plan instead of improving execution. When results don't come fast,
They switch routines. They search for something new. They assume the method is wrong. Often it's not. Often they just didn't stay long enough. Repetition requires patience. Patience requires emotional control. You already learned how to sit with pressure. Now you apply that skill to monotony. Monotony is pressure. It tests commitment. It asks one question every day. Will you still do this when it's no longer exciting? Your answer defines you. You have a choice. Let boredom push you away, or let it sharpen you. Here's the instruction. Pick fewer actions. Repeat them longer. Stop adding. Start refining. Same wake time. Same focus block. Same training baseline. Remove variety. Variety is entertainment. Repetition is training. This is uncomfortable at first. Your mind will resist. It will say, this isn't enough. This isn't
working. This feels slow. That voice is impatience. Ignore it. Impatience wants proof. Discipline wants process. Process produces proof. That's the order. Repetition trains trust. Every time you do what you said you would do, again, you reinforce self-trust. Every completed rep strengthens belief in your own reliability. Reliability is confidence. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need reassurance. That's mental toughness. You don't need their permission to repeat. You don't need approval to stay consistent. You need standards and obedience to them. Repetition removes choice. You don't ask, should I? You already decided. Decision fatigue disappears. Execution becomes automatic. This is why elite performers look calm. They are not constantly deciding. They are following systems. Systems built on repetition. That's the key. Think about pressure again. Repetition lowers pressure. Why? Because nothing is new. You've been here before. You've done this before. When chaos hits, repetitive training gives you something stable to return to. That stability keeps you grounded.